Hey guys, April 12th, 2026. I kind of wanted to pick up a little bit where I left off, going through some more setups that I do like to trade. Obviously, last weekend I talked a little bit about shorting into declining moving averages. For anybody that watched that video, took that video to heart, and then decided to themselves, you know what? Ariel, I'm going to execute on some of these things. I'm going to execute on stocks running into their declining moving averages on Wednesday, effectively app loving right into the 50. I mean, and it was just down the list, right? You could have looked at CrowdStrike, basically into the declining 100-day moving average right up against this left side of the chart into some overhead supply. And if you kind of went through that video and took that to heart, I wanted to go ahead and kind of continue on that. And, we'll pivot a little bit. And this week we'll talk about a bullish setup that I like to trade, and that is the flat base breakout. So I did take some notes. I'll try to not refer to those. We'll kind of just go with what I know off the top of my head, and let's talk about that setup a little bit. So effectively, it is a bullish setup, right? Price will have gone up, and then it will have digested, right? So you'll be in a steady uptrend, and then it'll just be a period of sideways. One of the reasons that I don't really like falling trend lines, right, is because you have price to the left of the chart, which is overhead supply. Now, of course, you have, and we'll talk about ARC being one of those flat base breakouts. Mark Minervini likes to consider those low cheat setups. That is how I look at them as well. But one of the characteristics of a flat base breakout is a horizontal pivot, right? Where you could look at the chart and say, you know what? That move has been in an uptrend. It has now consolidated. And above this horizontal line, good. Below the horizontal line, not so good. So that is the key characteristic. It is a bullish setup. Typically, when you have a chart that is exhibiting, characteristics of a flat-based breakout, it's not the only stock within the group that's looking like that or acting like that. So that is another important characteristic. Obviously, one of the ways that it can be viewed is, and we just got we just got markets to open up here, so a bunch of charts are moving on my screen, but. Yeah, like I was saying, one of the characteristics of a flat-based breakout is it won't be the only chart within the group that is doing something similar, right? So you'll have multiple charts within a group that are tightening up, or some taking off a little bit before another, but ultimately a group will be going up, a group will consolidate, and then a group will break out. So that is one of the very key characteristics of a flat-based breakout. Taking it from there, let's just kind of start to look through some of these charts, before I talk maybe too much about the pitfalls of a flat-based breakout. So GFI, again, a very, very nice uptrend. This chart, again, starts to consolidate above all key moving averages. That is very, very important. As you're making your way along the right-hand side of the chart, you are building a series of higher lows and higher lows and higher lows. And almost all great flat-based breakouts, I mean, literally almost all of them, are above all key moving averages. And so was it just gold, getting ready to break out in August? No, I included another chart, Kinross Gold, where also in July and then in August is when this thing starts to break out. And very, very similar. It's made a move up, and then it just starts to digest, where you just effectively have one nice flat pivot, and then yes, tries to poke its head through. Maybe you get stopped out, and then you get a nice little tight day on the first with an opportunity to buy it, this very next day, but ultimately already breaking out of this flat base. So again, one of the big characteristics of any flat base breakout is that it's normally not the only stock in the group, and even if they don't all break out at the exact same time, the group itself will be acting well. How do I personally like to buy these? Well, it could just be as simple as a break of prior day high. In this instance, that's exactly what KGC would have been. It would have been a breakout on the 4th. And what was going on in August? right? You really had gold stocks acting well. You had silver stocks acting well. You had this entire group and theme in an uptrend, which makes it that much easier to identify, which, again, it's very important as to why we focus on leading groups to begin with. Gold and silver was already a leading group. Now you've got multiple miners acting well. Now you've got them building flat-based breakouts. Now you've got them breaking out right around the same time in August. And then that becomes your edge, right? Your edge. And remember, half of a stock's price appreciation is directly correlated to the group it is in. So if you're focused on the strongest group, if you're focused on the strongest stocks, that's what they do. They go up, they go sideways. They go up, they go sideways. They go up, they go sideways, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So hopefully that, that's kind of sticking with you. And that makes some sense. And it's the reason why, if you want to be long bias, make sure that you are paying attention to what groups out there are acting best. Kind of taking a look at these quantums, and you saw this move last year. Yes, it's a little bit of a falling trend line, but it's effectively very flat. And then you saw what this thing did. You made a move up, and then you went sideways for a while, and then it was in September, right? September 11th, and I would even argue just before that, it had like this little bit of a cheat entry where, again, you made a move up, and then you had a very, very subtle bull flag, and then ultimately you broke out of the base. So you could have bought this thing on the 9th, could have snuck yourself in on the 11th, could have even gotten some more on the 12th. And a really, really nice flat base, nice flat consolidation in the quantum space, maybe a little bit more speculative, but at that time, if you go back to August and September, speculative money was really flowing, whether it was in some rare earths or whether it was in some quantums or whether it was in some nuclears, even the data centers. These themes were really, really moving. And again, it wasn't just IONQ that was consolidating in a nice flat base going all the way basically from May. Well, would you be too surprised, that Rigetti was doing something very similar right around that time? And then in September on the 11th, right, or excuse me, on the 12th, really, really breaking out, and on the 9th, kind of getting out of this very tight consolidation, holding the 50, getting back above, and then breaking out through its consolidation on the 12th in very same group, and then a breakout right around the same time. So hopefully, again, that when you go through some of these setups, you'll recognize, holy cow, it's group plays such an important role, and it's never just one stock, it's multiple. NVIDIA, this is, arguably my favorite one. You had this really nice move up, from, $14 pre-split or post-split. So like 150, 160, all the way up to $500, and then you go sideways for months and months on end. You end up just building higher lows up the right-hand side. You get incredibly tight, keying on the fact that it's above all key moving averages, keying on the fact that other semiconductors were acting really well at this time. SMCI was also consolidating nicely. Broadcom was acting great. And NVIDIA finally, I remember personally, I got myself positioned on the 5th, effectively as a 20 simple moving average reclaim. On the 60-minute chart, it was reclaiming the 200 EMA. And then a nice breakout on the 8th of January. So very, very nice to see. And then obviously a super move. What was also happening, SMCI, right at that time, would you be too surprised that this thing was consolidating? Again, one nice flat pivot. What do you notice on the dailies? Right on the daily chart, just some nice higher lows. And then effectively the old classic Mark Minervini VCP, a nice little, almost like a shakeout before the breakout, and then a really nice, huge pickup in volume on SMCI. Just a handful of days later, you already had your strength in NVIDIA, which made this one almost that much easier to trade. Semiconductor space, they're not actually semiconductors. They made the racks for the data centers, but ultimately a really nice flat base right through an all-time high. Absolutely picture perfect. ACLS, this one was one that I traded and actually broke out a little bit beforehand. Very slight, small variation. Obviously, you can go out to these peaks as well, and you're basically taking out those highs. But as you get closer into the right-hand side, just a very nice consolidation. Again, a move up, a nice flat sideways base. And before you go to really break out and start an ascent, you do get back above all key moving averages on the 5th, and then continuation from there in a good semiconductor group. And again, it's why I put such an emphasis on group. When a group gets moving, you don't want to argue with it. You just want to say, hey, over the last month, this is the strongest. Over the last 3 months, this is what's the strongest. If some of you guys go back and study scanning for relative strength, I posted that video in the room. You'll notice that I was talking about silver stocks, and like they were the strongest group for 6 months in the market before I made that video. And I talked about them as the strongest 6-month group, as the strongest 3-month group, and this was in like July of last year. And they didn't go parabolic until this year, early this year. So just imagine that they were for 3 to 6 months, they were already the strongest group in the market. And then you get an opportunity to get positioned, and then they just trend higher for 3, 4, 5 more months, and then they go parabolic. So again, just a really good reminder that you do not need to try and time any of this stuff. Focus on the leading groups, and you'll start to see setups setting up together. Speaking of flat base breakouts, you also very, very similarly saw another flat base breakout here in ACLS. Again, maybe not as clean, but you get a nice move up. You get a nice sideways consolidation on the right-hand side of the chart. Again, just everything tends to be fractals, right? You get a nice move up, and then you get another higher low. You get incredibly tight on the 7th. You get a break of this consolidation on the 8th, which just so happens to align with the breakout of this bigger consolidation at that same time, and then you experience momentum burst right from that spot. So definitely something important to be paying attention to and keying in on. And what have you been noticing? ACLS, a semiconductor. What else have you been noticing? Intel, right? Again, maybe not a picture perfect flat base breakout, but again, similar where it's like a high cheat setup. You've been in an uptrend. You build basically a new consolidation right near the highs, and then you start to break out of a horizontal pivot in a group that is acting well. It's not just ACLS. It's not just Intel. It's also Marvell, similar story. Again, is this a flat base breakout? No, they're not always going to be super, super clean technical setups. But again, you don't need a super incredibly clean technical setup to trade the stock. You need different entry tactics per se. Let's say a flat base breakout, a low type flag instead of a high type flag, a reclaim of a key moving average. But why are you taking those setups? The best reason that you are taking any particular setup ever is twofold. One, it's in one of the best groups in the market. Two, you have a way to enter that you've studied and you know how to manage risk. And then obviously you are using progressive exposure, and the market is telling you, hey, you know what? You're getting some traction on the long side. Either the market's super friendly, you're seeing things super well, or you're just super lucky and you're walking around with a horseshoe. In either of those scenarios, that allows you to go and get a little bit more exposure in the market. And then I also wanted to talk about Tesla. This is kind of like almost like a low cheat setup, but again, a bit of a flat base, where again, it's just about the horizontal pivot. It's not at the highs. So it's, if you talk or listen to Mark Minervini, you're going to probably hear him say something like a low cheat setup. But again, I still consider it a flat base, right? Where the top of that base continues to see some resistance right around the exact same spot, ultimately building higher lows as it, moves its way higher and just tightening. And I want you to kind of envision, the door stopper behind any of your doors on the metal spring. You pull that spring down, and then what does it do when you let it go? It just oscillates until it gets nice and tight on the right-hand side. It's the same thing. You pull the spring, and then it oscillates, and it tightens up on the right-hand side, and then it's explosive through the pivot. And I remember I bought this on this day, and I believe I bought some more on the 11th, and then there you go. You get that really nice explosive ramp through the flat pivot. So was Tesla setting up with a bunch of other stocks? No, it was not, which, sometimes that doesn't make that setup as sweet. But again, just something to think about if you are thinking about structuring a trade around that flat base. What are some of the pitfalls or drawdowns of trading a flat base? Buying breakouts in certain environments can be lead to a bunch of paper cuts, which it's important to make sure you are sizing your positions correctly. And maybe another pitfall is you deal with a lot of fake breakouts. So I understand that some people, when you get as very close to this right hand side and you're building these higher lows, there are times you can get positioned here but actually just risk off of the most recent pivot low and then just size it very small, and then when you finally get the breakout, add to that. I prefer to be in a super bullish environment where you can just break through the pivot and then it's gone, picture perfect. You don't really have to deal with it after that. And that, again, is my preference. Rocket Lab, I thought it was also really nice. Again, you get a move up, right? And then you build a nice horizontal pivot. I remember on this one, I started to get myself positioned. I tried it on the first, not a strong enough close for me to want to keep it. But again, just a really nice tight consolidation against the 50 and then a push above the 20. I tried it once, but then I tried it again on the second. And then that ended up being really nice. Could you have bought it, even when we took out the pivot? Of course you could have. That would have had you buying it on Friday the 3rd, basically buying it over a prior day high as you are starting to break out. And, maybe it's not like the world's greatest move, but you still can't scoff at something moving up, almost 30% in 8 sessions, right? Where else do you get a 30% return on your money in 8 days? Basically nowhere on planet Earth except the stock market. Trim into that strength, trail the rest, and then maybe you get stopped out down the road, and then you just make a little bit less on your trailing shares. That's just life. That's just trading. But ultimately, a very similar concept. What else was working at this time? ASTS, KTOS, KRMN, and you just HWM, and you just go down the list of aerospace and defense stocks which were acting well at this time. And then ARC, again, I would argue that this is a low cheat setup. Mark Minervini would tell you it's a low cheat setup. Similarly, right, you've got your high over here in February, you break down, you start to turn back up, get above all key moving averages. But again, the concept, I want you to envision what the concept is. You make a move up, you then go sideways, you consolidate, and then you break out on a pickup in volume. Again, a nice flat base. Yes, is this a low cheat setup? And it's probably an example that I will share again as a low cheat setup, right? You've got if you had this, but then this consolidation took place up here in the 60s, it would be a cup and a handle. So again, just very slight nuances in the setup, but how do you enter? Fairly similar, a break of that horizontal pivot. How much do you size? You size properly, 10 to 15 to 20% of your portfolio, depending on how quickly any one particular ETF or stock might move. And then why do you go and buy it? Well, if it were an individual stock and not an ETF, the group is acting well, or in the case of this ETF, a lot of the stocks at the time for Kathy were acting well within this ETF. And then you had a really, really nice move up. And, what were her holdings, right? Tesla was acting well. Roblox was acting well. Coin was acting well. Robinhood was acting well. A lot of her top holdings were acting pretty damn fantastic. And then, of course, that is exactly why ARC does what it does. And then as ARC starts to break down, of course, what are her top holdings looking like? Pretty terrible. But the concept remains, if it's in a good group, then you want to make sure that you're paying attention to that. And if you start to see flat bases set up amongst the group, you've got that kind of you've got that evidence that, hey, you know what, this group might want to continue higher. It's done nothing wrong. All it's done is go up, consolidate, and I'm not just seeing one stock do this. I'm seeing 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 of them all do the exact same thing. So hopefully that makes some sense to you guys. And I'll do another one of these videos next week, and maybe we'll pick another bear setup that I like to trade. And hopefully I'll just kind of do these for all of the setups that I like to trade, help kind of make more sense and rhyme or reason as to how I like to trade these, why I like to trade these, and then the environment in which these work in. Ultimately, they work in a healthy uptrending environment. They work in a healthy uptrending group and that is most important, right? Because the market could be kind of crummy, but you could be getting these, right? If you look at ExxonMobil, effectively a flat base breakout, but it's a 3-year flat base breakout, hence the reason you get this nice prolonged move that lasts multiple months, and a trade that I've been in. But what has been going on with ExxonMobil and its group? Crude oil's been doing well, even though the market may have not been doing so great during that time. That's why I put so much more emphasis on individual group than I do market. Sometimes people will just say generically, the market's not doing so great, to which I'll say, I'm trading oil. I could give a shit less what the tech ETF or what the S&P 500 might be doing. I'm focused on energy, right? Or I don't care what the QQQ is doing. I'm focused on gold or silver or etc. And it's much more important to just kind of dial in your focus instead of just generically stating the market, right? That is just way too broad of a statement to make. Although, yes, if you're trading the NASDAQ stocks, right? Like if you're trading NVIDIA, focusing in on the QQQ does make some sense. But ultimately, the QQQ could be doing nothing, but semiconductors are acting great. That could still very well be a valid flat base breakout. So hopefully that kind of helps answer some questions and gears you guys up a little bit more. I encourage any of you guys to find as many of these setups as you possibly can, and then just see how could I have entered, what other stocks in the group were acting well during that time, and then maybe what was the underlying market doing for this tech name or for this energy stock at that time, and then start to kind of build that in to your thought process as you're taking some of these setups. So again, I plan on I look forward to doing a few of these over the next couple of weeks, and then hopefully we'll have all these setups down into a video for everybody. So with that, I will see you guys bright and early tomorrow morning. Cheers.